On day 2 of our Art and Power in Movement, an international conference rethinking the Black arts and Black power movements of the 1960s and 1970s, the first major plenary session was held on 40 years of Black music in the Pioneer Valley. It was chaired by Professor John H. Bracey Jr., a member of the Du Bois Department, and included the incomparable legendary musician Randy Weston, Glenn Siegel of Magic Triangle and WMUA radio station, Terry Janour, the director of the Augusta Savage Art Gallery at UMass Amherst and a talented musician herself, as well as Frederick Tillis of UMass Amherst Fine Arts Center, the director emeritus, and also an incomparable musician.
And so we want to start, where do we want to start? We'll start with Fred. You want to start, Professor Fred?
Fine.
Okay, so you can either stay there and come up here if you want.
I'll stay here.
Okay. Fred can do whatever he wants.
This is something, yes, it is. It's really a rather wonderful sight to see so many of you here, so many different flavors of people, so many cultures and everything. It's just a wonderful sight to see this. I was almost late for this meeting because there was a program that came on television having to do with Unshackle Rashid. There's so much stuff, incidentally, on the air now, and we can talk about what we should have done or what we should be doing. I think within the next 2 years, most people who come to a university will know history much better than they did before, because there are many things that are being unearthed. And this was about a slave ship the Dutch had done, and of course, their first escape by an African who happened to be on and find a way. He was from Cape Cod, you probably know about Cape Cod and so forth, to find a way to have mutiny and the ability to capture the ship. I won't go too long on that, but these are the kinds of things that interrupt me. Anything that I see has to do with the culture. I've been about 22 or 23 pages, on all different kinds of cultures. What I would like to say about them too, though, is every place I've gone, I've heard African, but not African only, American classical music. Now that's a term I'm sure Max would agree with me, but Billy Taylor also had a thing for calling it America's classical music. And I think that's very valuable, because if you look at music all over the world, and with respect, there's a European tradition, very fine tradition. I write in it and so forth. But then there's another tradition that has a rhythm, it has a melody, it has something altogether different that's all over the world. Everywhere you go, you will hear African American music. China, India, doesn't matter. So I think that we're very much on target and calling it American classical music. European classical music. We have both types on the radio here too, and so forth. But of course, I think those are kinds of important things that should make us proud and also enlighten us. One of the things about African music, African American music, jazz, is that it is a very spiritual kind of music. I heard coming in the radio some music. I said, oh, this is nice. By the way, WMUA is changed its format a little bit, right?
It's always changing its format.
All right. They have now many students and many other kinds of people who use that station and who bring music to you. And it is a very important step in the right way, because the world, you just look at all these people here. There's a mass culture here. And that's the way the music is becoming. very, very much so. I think that some of the people I'd like to mention, and I definitely never will mention them all, but would be Max Roach. I came here in 1970, and I think that Max Roach came in 1972. And he came on the basis of 5 different people. These were all artists of one sort or the other. Max Roach, R.T. Sheff, Nelson Stevens, and a couple,
Paul Harrison.
and a couple of others. It was a cluster.
Paul Carter Harris.
Yeah, Paul Carter Harris.
Paul Carter Harris.
And Diana Reynolds.
Yeah, Diana Reynolds. Okay, they helped me. But that group was a very important group of people to come here. Notice you had two musicians at the top, but you had an artist, you had visual artists, you had people with lecture, and that happened as a result of Dr. Randolph Brommery, who was the chancellor of the university at the time, and they had said, oh, you know, I was up there too, and they said, oh, he'd never get that many at once, but he did. Nobody talks too much about that, but he got those people. Anyway, with Max coming in 1972 and Archie and so forth, Max is a pivotal figure here because he brought in many, many outstanding jazz artists. He also started a scholarship, which is in perpetuity. It will always be here. It's called Max Roach. He said, Fred, you know, this is Fletcher Henderson. I said, I just put Dash Max Roach because he's that type of fellow. He was going to make it Fletcher Henderson, who was a giant in the field. And I thought he should be given the credit. So it's the Fletcher Henderson Max Roach Scholarship. And it'll be here forever. That's the type of fellow he was. He also, of course, you know, Tito Puente, you've heard of him. He's that type of guy too. He brought drummers, he brought all sorts of people. And Tito came here and said on one occasion that, well, not in this building, but in the Fine Arts Center building, because he'd have a talk with the students. And he complained about Juilliard. Juilliard School of Music, you've heard of that place? It still doesn't have jazz. He flirted with it for a minute there, and then I think it was too strong. It wanted a competition between the European and the American classical music, and that's fine. But he was complaining, because he said he was thinking about trying to do something. He's a very famous Latin musician. And Tito said that, they said no. And so he said, well, you know, maybe we'll give it here. I don't know what he did, it not really passed before it could. But these are the types of people and the type of experiences that we had here at the University of Massachusetts in these 40 years. All sorts of things. And I'm just coming periodically with things on my mind that I've jotted a few notes down, but to let you know, it was a very vital community, vital community. After Max Roach accident, actually had said, you know, I want to be even more involved in music, so we transferred him from African American Studies to the music department. And that opened up another avenue for us. I was here, and they asked me, well, they said, Fred, when I came here, the guy who was over the music department was Philip Bizanson, and he said, you know, the students are giving me trouble, and you know, they want to hear jazz, and they don't do this and that and the other. Well, I said, well, he said he was trying to find somebody who could just be a supervisor for them, let them play it, let them have fun. You know? And I said, well, no, I think the music is much more than that. I said, it is a very important music, and it should be a part of the curriculum. And I said, I will do that, provided it is under those circumstances. Fortunately, Philip Bizanson happened to be my composition teacher at the University of Iowa, where I got a PhD. Maybe that's why I came here, actually, because he got on the phone and called me. And I started a program called African American Music. All right? And I was the leader of the band called the stage band, not stage band, but just a, oh, thank you. And then after Max George came in, he played with the band, and we did a piece of his. I remember the name of it now. Next giant that came in was Horace Boyer. You remember any of you? Well, some of you may remember Horace Boyer. He's a gospel singer. I'm trying to suggest that this music is very complex, but it shows a culture and a kind of presence. That's why it's so prevalent all over the world. He was a gospel musician, very, very, very famous. He had just graduated from Eastman School of Music, very fine school. And I think it was the summer of '73 that I brought him in. I happened to be acting director of the music department at the time, and some of the music department people didn't like it, and then they went up and tried to say, oh, yeah, Fred messed up, and you did this and all that. And bringing in, you know, these people. Okay, so I said, Phil Bezanson and I were far enough. He convinced the dean that I didn't mess up, and so the guy stayed here until he deceased. You know, all sorts of things like that, which shows you the spirit and the soul and why maybe we were such a powerful place for the past 40 years. He did gospel music, most of you around would know. And gospel music is a part of a jazz tradition. If you want to use jazz as the main thing in classical music, gospel music, blues, all those things come from the same source. I think that that will probably be most of what I would want to say. The fact that we grew because of these people, not just Fred Tillis, but I was in a position at the time to be able to make a lot of this happen. And I'm very, very pleased with what we've been able to do. Some of the people are around here now. And I'll turn it over and let some of the other talk with me. All right?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. I just made a couple of notes. They don't feel necessarily connected. They're connected in my head, and so I'll just go through them, and hopefully you can make connections. I wanted to say, as John was introducing everyone, I was thinking this morning about how I wouldn't be doing the things I'm doing if it wasn't for my parents. They're still alive. They're 81, 82, and one of the my first lessons growing up was that I am free. And I don't mean free politically, I'm talking about emotionally. Of course, they're connected, but that's one of the things that I think prepared me best in my life. So I'm always getting to the point where things feel too tight, and so I move on. And I get bored with scenes, and so I break out. And I think it's that early message about emotional freedom that's really been a great foundation for me. So I thank my parents for that. I'm getting ready to see them next week, so just they're on my mind. The other thing, and I say this because I'm a woman, and I think that as a violinist and someone who identifies in different capacities, not only as a musician, but in a number of capacities. One of the things that I remember growing up was that my parents I have to say my father really, because he is a feminist, and my mother really learned a lot from his perspective. And what he never said, when you get married, when you have children, I never ever heard that. I always heard, when you get your degrees, and when you're out in the world, and you're moving, you know, mountains, and you're doing things. So I heard that growing up, and I am grateful for that perspective. And those things have been important to me as a musician, and particularly as a woman playing in a male-dominated field. Very often, there's not a consciousness of the fact, you know, it's like if we're all very often among male musicians, there's not a consciousness that we're all men. No, there's a woman in the room, you know. So there's not that consciousness, and so I have had to do my own work and take care of myself to move through that culture. And so when I came here, I've played the violin all my life since I was about 7. So that's about 50 years. I've always played. And when I came here, I was 21. I had just finished college. I had a degree in philosophy. And I came up here because a friend of mine said, I had finished school. And a friend of mine said, I'm from New York City. So a friend of mine said, you ever been up to Amherst, Massachusetts? Because I didn't want to stay in New York. I've never loved New York. And you ever been up to Amherst, Massachusetts? No, never been. He said, why don't you come on up? We'll go up for the day. I said, fine. It was the summer. I had just graduated in June, and it was summer. And I didn't know what I was going to do, wasn't sure. And so we came up, and the day that I came up, I found a job.
Yeah.
Remember Smitty, the photographer?
Yeah, John Smith, yeah.
John Smith. Found a job as a secretary. Found a room in a boarding house on Prospect Street in the center of Amherst, and moved up here and stayed. I went back to New York in the 80s for about 10 years, but I started playing and meeting people, and it was a great place to be able to, it was a comfortable place. You know, what about the Valley is so attractive? There's such a wide range of people. It's so forward-thinking. It was easy to live here at that time and be a 21-year-old and find other musicians experimenting. And Vishnu Wood, who played with Randy for some time, Vishnu Wood was teaching at Hampshire College. It was my first time improvising. And so I was in his ensemble. Wow, that was wonderful, because before that I had played in the European classical tradition, reading and string ensembles and orchestras. Oh, let's see, what's important? What's important here? I don't know. What's important? Well,
You are.
it's all about me right now. Huh? Okay. So in 80, I went back to New York. Why? Because I needed to build muscle. I wanted to be not just a good violinist, I wanted to be outstanding. And I knew that to be outstanding, I needed to be in New York, and I needed to play with the big boys in New York, and I needed to get roughed up a little bit. And so I stayed down in New York for about 10 years, and I was just completely immersed in the jazz new music scene, the Black Rock Coalition, with great people and great experiences. In '90, I decided, I had already, by the way, when I went back to New York, before I went to New York, I had come up here, played my music. I got a master's degree here in education, and then I went back to New York. In '90, I decided that I wanted to, I was frustrated by that time with a certain, what I saw, the older musicians weren't making any more money than we were. Our teachers weren't making any more money in the music than we were, and I was frustrated, and I just wanted to, I was wanting to get back to, I wanted to go back and get a doctoral degree. I came back and I did that, and at that time, Dr. Tillis hired me here to run the Augusta Savage Gallery on campus, and I've stayed. So, I think the last thing I want to say, so at this point, I have not picked up my violin in about 8 months, and I'm very proud of that fact, because I don't want to, and I didn't feel like it. And you know, people are always saying, "Oh, Terry, are you playing? Are you?" I didn't feel like it because I'm completely immersed in writing. I'm working on a novel. I have a book of poetry, not published, but I will get it published. And I have a body of visual art that I've been working on. I'm looking at putting this all together into a nice package, and I don't know how that will unfold, but I'm always dreaming, and I give myself permission to take care of myself as the artist, and so those things are important.
It's my honor to share the dais with esteemed Professor John Gracie, your friend Terry Janour, who I had the honor of presenting a couple of years ago with fellow violinist Billy Bang and Charles Burnham in a tribute to Leroy Jenkins. My mentor, former boss, Dr. Fred Tillis, who 22 years ago gave an enthusiastic young jazz presenter a nurturing toehold in the university. Tom Reaney, who I've learned so much about this music from, and of course Randy Weston, who's been a hero of mine, as he has for so many years, and I'll be brief so we can hear Randy. I moved to Weston, Massachusetts in 1980. A few years before that, I had an epiphany of sorts. I was on my bed listening to Charles Mingus's "Better Get Hit in Your Soul," and it just hit me. The drive and the urgency and the virtuosity and the emotional directness just pointed me in a totally different direction than I had been going. And I parlayed that exhilaration into dedicating my life to spreading the sound of joy. In the mid-'80s, I enrolled at the university here, taking courses with Archie Shepp and John Gracie and others, and finding my way to Roberta Uno's New World Theater office, which was then in Hasbrook Hall. Roberta works at the Ford Foundation now, and had formed New World Theater in 1979, which was then known as Third World Theater until 1984. And she also founded the Solos and Duos series, which I inherited, the Bright Moments Festival, and continued the Black Musicians Conference, which was founded by the department in the early 70s. My work with Roberta and those programs gave me a real understanding of how to curate and produce live music. I got to escort the British writer and photographer Valerie Wilmer, whose book, As Serious as Your Life, remains a very important document of the new music of the 1960s. Got to hang out with her for a few days around Amherst and pick her brain. Got to spend some quiet time with Abdullah Ibrahim, great South African pianist and composer, when he brought his octet Akaya to the Bright Moments Festival. I remember interviewing him for the Daily Hampshire Gazette and asking him how his music could be filled with such beauty when his country was so distorted by violence. And he said, "We've already created the new South Africa." Fela Kuti, Babatunde Olatunji, Mongo Santa Maria, they all performed at Bright Moments over many years. This place, both the university and the Pioneer Valley in general, is known nationally as a center for what the art ensemble called Great Black Music. Marion Brown, and we've heard so many names mentioned, Max Roach, of course, brother Yusef Lateef, who just turned 90. I had the honor of presenting him twice, once when he turned 80 with Von Freeman in a quintet, and then just last year with the percussionist Adam Rudolph. I want to mention Roland Wiggins, and I really didn't know him personally, but as I've read more about the history of this region, it seemed like he was a really pivotal figure and someone who really served the music not only as a professor but as a theoretician. And as far as I could tell, reading some history, and actually I have a former student, Brad Farberman, who got his master's from Rutgers last year, who wrote his dissertation on Amherst music scene of the 70s, and I believe interviewed you, Fred, as part of his master's thesis. But he talks about Roland Wiggins as bringing people like Makonda Ken McIntyre and Jimmy Owens and others to the university to get their degrees, Bill Cosby among them. And now we've seen, you know, the second and even the third generation of folks. People like Steve Turre studied here in the late 70s. And in fact, the first Magic Triangle concert that I produced was a trio with Steve, Mulgrew Miller on piano, and Bob Stewart on tuba. Kind of interesting instrumentation, but it worked. Michael Dessin, trombonist and composer, who studied quite extensively with Yusef Lateef, now professor at UC Irvine, and a recording artist. Brandon Ross was at Hampshire College, you know, in the day. Fred Ho, the great baritone saxophonist, grew up in Amherst and was very influenced by Archie and Max and others. Kevin Jones, a drummer who was very tight with Archie as a young person, who spent 14 years with the Isley Brothers, and I also want to mention, historically, Archie Shepp's trip to Europe in '79 with his so-called Attica Blues Band, which brought Avery to Europe for the first time, Avery Sharp, and Kevin Jones was on that tour, and I believe Brandon Ross too, just giving the generation of students who have grown up here a chance to play with Archie and record and tour Europe. I've been producing concerts on campus for 22 years under the rubric of the Magic Triangle Jazz Series and the Solos and Duo Series. My attitude has always been sort of a grassroots DIY affair. So I'm part of the institution, but I'm under the radar, and I'm doing my own thing, and it's been just a tremendous opportunity for me to be close to the music, and I thank you all for being here.